think we're ready to start. You're not here to put your hands up? No? Yeah, look, welcome everyone, and it's really good to see these meetings are getting a few more people each time as we're getting more confident. And I know that the audience from last month's meeting got up to over 250 online. And that was the Evo Energy presentation. And they sent me a nice note, which is on our website. Thank yous for the questions, and they've actually designed a pamphlet for customers out of the questions we asked. So they went away and designed answers, and also questions they took on notice are on the website. Anyway, what I'll do, I'll hand over to the Minister for Territory and Community Services, Chris Dill, and he's going to talk to us for 20 minutes, I think, Chris, is that right? Yeah. And our timekeeper here will give us one, and then we'll go to some questions. I know a number of people have got questions. And then we'll go to the discussion about the Ridley Street upgrade. Now, who's leading that tonight?
That's Sophie with the support of Anna.
Okay. So I'll then hand over to you. And once again, I really enjoyed the slides. I've had a look at them. I hope you'll give us a really good conversation, and I'm encouraging people to get onto the Have Your Say facility and give feedback. So without further ado, over to Chris. Chris will do an acknowledgement of country anyway, so I won't do it too. Chris.
Thanks, Bill. And I'll start by saying Ngunnawal Wari Darawari Dignity Wangirulu Jin in pay my respects to the Ngunnawal elders whose lands we're meeting on today. And thanks for inviting me here to give a presentation. I am pleased to be here with officials from Transport Canberra and City Services as well, who will be presenting on a range of matters. We're at a stage in the parliamentary term where it's about the middle of the term, and so a lot of the design work that's happened on some of our election commitments, including some of the upgrades in Weston Creek, have reached the stage where we're sort of consulting on those designs, and some of them have actually moved into the construction phase as well. So you might have noticed that the hoarding's gone up at Duffy Shops for the upgrades that we're undertaking there. The officials will be talking further about the concept plans that we've released for the upgrades to Brearley Street, which is, for those that don't know, the main street of Weston, next to Coolman Court. So really excited to get your feedback on those to help inform the final designs before we move ahead with construction on that project. And the officials will also be talking about some of the intersection upgrades that will be occurring around the Western Group Centre. On some intersections that are not performing as well as other intersections around Canberra, have a quite significant crash history, one of which has been designated a black spot site and has got some federal funding. Two others which also have a poor performance history in the past down Payson Street on Street and Drive, and also at Managera Drive coming out of Coolman Court onto Street and Drive as well. So they'll be talking a little bit more about those. I also wanted to let you know about a couple of major pieces of policy which the ACT government has released in the last week in the transport space, which I'm responsible for as the Transport Minister in the ACT government. So last week I released the Active Travel Plan, which is this document. You can get a copy from the Your Say website. This is a plan. What we mean by active travel is walking, cycling, skateboarding, but also micro-mobility, so e-scooters and e-bikes as well. And we want to see, as part of the plan, we've set out the vision to see more people walking and cycling more often. And to do that, we've set out 5 priorities in the plan that we'd like your feedback on. The first one, and the reason why it's been put first is because we know it's so critical to encouraging more people to walk and cycle, is around safe walking and cycling infrastructure. So at the moment, we have a network of cycle paths. Some of them are off-road, which are safe, they're separated from the roadway. But of course, about over a decade ago now, the ACT government, working with the cycling community, also put on our roads on-road cycling lanes as well. And they're quite well used by many in our community. The road warriors that we sort of see each day commuting to work, often in Lycra, not always, using those. But for another group in the community, they don't feel safe to use those on-road paths. And we've seen in cities in Europe, like Copenhagen, and cities in the Netherlands, for example, where they've put in safe, separated, protected infrastructure, where cyclists are separated from vehicles on the road, that we get really high take-up of cycling in the community. So that's something we'd like to invest more in the ACT. And there are some examples around the place, as we've put in the new cycling infrastructure in Hastings Street in Weston, which linked Weston Creek over to Woden. We've got a 3-metre wide shared path which is separated through castellated curbs. That's the type of infrastructure that we'd like to put in, and we're asking the community's feedback as well on the second priority under the plan, which is around having better maintained paths but also a better connected network. And we've released a cycling network map and also a walking map where you can actually go online and make comments on the map, drop a pin and provide some comments about where you'd like to see improvements in the network for walking and cycling. It could be a missing zebra crossing if you think it's unsafe to walk in a particular area. It could be putting in a missing link in our path network where unfortunately we do have a number of those in the community, and there are some in Weston that have been identified through the community input already. So they're obviously barriers to people walking and cycling. We'd like to try and identify those and then look at how we can prioritise getting those upgraded and putting in that safe infrastructure. The third part of the plan is around making sure that we support new forms of active travel like micro-mobility. We've committed to roll out e-scooters throughout the whole of Canberra by the end of the year. So we're working with the e-scooter shared scheme providers at the moment around how that might happen in Woden and Gungala next, adding to the inner north of Belconnen. And then we will be going to Weston Creek and Tuggeranong following that by the end of the year as well. And there'll be some further conversations with the community, including the Community Council, about how that rollout best occurs in your community. Where are the best parking places for the parking zones for those scooters? Where should we not allow scooters to go? Where should we make sure that there's low speed zones, which can be done through the technology with the e-scooters. So we're going to explore some new forms of micro-mobility as well as part of the plan. We know that e-bikes are becoming more popular, and they're a great no-sweat solution. You don't really need to have a shower at the other end because you're being supported through the power system that's attached to those bikes. So we're looking at how we can promote those, as well as the other priorities of the plan around better bicycle parking, reducing some of the other barriers to cycling, end-of-trip facilities, making sure that we've got good guidelines and guidance there for particularly businesses that want to have good shower facilities and places to store and park a bike at the end of a trip. And then working with community on behaviour change as well. So we've been currently running, you might have seen, a road safety campaign which is called Share the Road, which is a road safety campaign designed to improve safety for vulnerable road users, those pedestrians and cyclists. So we want to have a look at that. We also have kick-started a conversation, which you might have saw in the paper, around slower streets. Now this is something that came from the pandemic, when we had communities coming forward to the government saying, there's a lot of people walking, cycling in our community, more so than usual. We'd like to send a message to motorists in our area that because of that we want them to slow down. So we put up some signage, worked with them. We had a number of suburbs opt in. It was very successful. We had even more suburbs that wanted to come on board. And it's now, I think, now is a good time to have a conversation about what we want to do with the speed limits on local streets. So we'll be doing that next year as part of the Road Safety Action Plan, and we'll be consulting with communities and having a genuine conversation about the evidence, which shows that for 50 kilometre speed limit, the probability of surviving a crash is actually very low, 70%. wouldn't survive at a crash at 50%, at 50 kilometres an hour. At 40 kilometres per hour, it drops down to 20. So it's at a real tipping point, and worth having a conversation about what we do on the local streets. I'm not talking about collector roads through suburbs or arterial roads, but the local streets that we all live on. So that's the active travel plan. It's out now for consultation. Have a look at the website. I've sent a letter to everyone in Weston Creek with a QR code, so have a look out for the letter and you can scan the QR code to get access to the plan. And in addition to that, the government's also released our electric vehicle, a zero emissions vehicle strategy. So this is a strategy to try and address the largest source of transport emissions, which is now over 60% of our emissions. And we want to try and tackle that, bring that down. We've set new targets for trying to move to zero emissions vehicles. We want to see 90% of new vehicle sales by 2030 being zero emissions vehicles. And we've also said that by 2035 we want to see all internal combustion engine vehicles phased out on ACT roads. So this is a significant piece of policy. And we'll be working with the community with the incentive schemes that we've got in place already and working in other ways to make sure that we support people on this transition. What it does is that it gives people very early notice, about 12 years ahead of time, that we like them in the future when they're changing their vehicle in 8 or 9 years' time to have to think about going to a zero emissions vehicle. And we've of course got the incentive schemes like for example, paying no stamp duty on a zero emissions vehicle. We've got the zero interest loans for up to $15,000 for people who want to purchase a zero emissions vehicle and get the benefits from that in terms of not having to pay for fuel, which has of course gone through the roof with the war in Ukraine. And we'll be looking at further incentive schemes as well. So this is a significant change, but it's one, if we're serious about tackling climate change, that we have to tackle those transport emissions, because for us in the ACT, that's the large majority of where they're coming from, is transport, and particularly light vehicles. But of course, as part of that as well, is encouraging people to use sustainable modes of transport. Public transport in particular, we're moving to the zero emissions vehicles there. We've got 12 buses, electric buses that will arrive before the end of the year. And we're just out in the market at the moment to purchase a further 90. They'll be stored at the new Weston bus depot, which will be our first fully electric bus depot. And we're at the moment just training all of the mechanics that we've got there in our existing depots at Belconnen and Tuggeranong, through the Canberra Institute of Technology, to get the skills to work on those electric buses so that we don't leave those workers behind. And it's been an incredibly successful program already. All Tesla mechanics are going through that program at CIT, as well as a lot of the mechanics in the private sector who will be working on our vehicles as we need to go in and service them in the future if they're electric. So it's a big transformation that's underway, and walking and cycling, of course, are the original forms of zero emissions transport, and so that's why we're encouraging those as well through the active travel plan. But I might leave it there, and I'll take any questions on those matters, and then we can move into the presentations about Breedley Street, the intersections, and also some parking issues as well.
Can I ask about the walking cycling? Are you starting to go separate cycling?
Microphone, thank you. There's people at home who can't listen to you. You have to nod.
Can you hear me? Yeah, the walking cycling. So you're actually saying you're going to have a separate walking and a separate cycling path, because pedestrians that are walking are getting almost hit by cyclists on the same path.
Yeah, it's a great question. So the answer is yes, in those really high frequency areas where we've got large numbers of pedestrians and cyclists and it can be dangerous. We do want to look at separating, so having dedicated separate cycle paths and then having separate footpaths alongside them. And that's been done in a couple of areas already. Down in Tuggeranong, if you've been down to the town centre there with the cycling upgrades there. It's been done in Phillip and Carina Street as well at Weston Town Centre. And we'd like feedback from the community to identify, using the map and the pins that I mentioned, those hotspot areas where we do need to actually separate cyclists from pedestrians as well as motor vehicle traffic. So drop a pin and tell us where those areas are. Often they're in particularly high frequent areas. We've got a couple in the city, near the university on Barry Drive, that we're certainly looking very closely at, and we're keen to hear about others locally.
Can I ask about the bus?
Yep.
Is that okay?
Sure.
Or you just
All
want
right.
to walk inside?
All right, sorry, you've had one question. There's other questions. So please sit down for a moment.
Thank you. My question is about increasing the services on the bus network, particularly if people want to use it more. There's a couple of issues when I try to use it. My biggest gripe is that the R7 doesn't connect to the suburban buses, sorry. So you sit for 15 minutes in the freezing cold. And that is a change. They used to connect. So it'd be awesome if Weston Creek was reconnected to that, because where do you wait? It's not long enough to do anything. The other part of the issue I have for mobility is seems a bit petty, but the tap-on, I can't read the white print on a blue background, and I'm sure I'm not the only person that has those vision issues, so that's another one. And I've had feedback from a lot of mums about the lack of school runs going to the suburb of Weston, and that's why they're all parking down on the corner of Mully Street, and they worry about the safety of their children. So I'm just wondering if those three things could be addressed.
Yeah, so there are a few things there. So we look at the timings of the bus routes on a yearly basis, and we're just going through that process at the moment. We're running an interim network at the moment, and one of the reasons for that is we've had workforce absences as a result of COVID-19. Everyone's experiencing that at the moment, but we've had actually 73 people away in Transport Canberra on average over the last few weeks, which is massive. And we haven't actually had to drop that many services, thankfully, because we're running on this interim network, which gives us a little bit more flexibility. We're going to try and bring that back as soon as we can, but we need to recruit a lot more staff and we're actually out there at the moment. So if you want to become a bus driver, please get in touch with Transport Canberra. There's info sessions, you can get on a bus, try it out. We want to bring more services back, particularly on the weekend, once we've got those drivers on board to deliver those reliable services. The timings we look at, particularly around school bell timings, which change every year, but we also look at the connections with the routes. So that's good feedback. I'll pass that on to Transport Canberra. The transport planners there to look at what they can do as part of the next timetable update about whether we can improve the timings. Is there a particular route, local route, that you're thinking of?
It's the Rapid 7 that comes to Coolo.
It's the Rapid 7 that comes down to Coolo. Then if you want to go to any suburbs such as Holder, Duffy, so you're on the bus and you see your connection leave.
Yeah, okay. So
it's a bit frustrating.
66 and a few of the others to have a look at. That's absolutely fine. In relation to the ticketing system, so we're actually about to very soon. We're in the very final stages of procurement for a new ticketing system with a new provider, and that will be implemented next year. So it will be a completely new way of thinking about accessing public transport. You'll be able to buy a ticket on your phone without needing to necessarily tap on. You'll be able to use a card, as you can at the moment, or you can use your credit card or a EFTPOS card, for example. So there's going to be a whole range of ways to pay for public transport that haven't been available before. We're hoping that will reduce barriers for people taking it up. And then the final question was in relation to
The school bus run.
the school bus run, yeah. So as part of the timetable updates, we look at how many people are using the existing buses that go out to particularly some of the private schools. Most students on the network, of course, use our route bus system, and we encourage them to do that. But we'll certainly have a look at what the capacity is like on that route.
Can I suggest you go to the corner of Mully Street between 3 and 4 and see the chaos?
Happy to. Happy to. And we've got the school safety program that works with the schools and school PNCs around safety issues around pick up and drop off and access to buses as well. So we can certainly get them involved.
I've got a couple of questions here from people watching. One of them, first one, it's a common one from this group. When are we ever going to see some proper policing out here? When are we actually going to see a permanent police presence? Now, we know there's additional police being put on the beat, but it's very hard to get one. So that's the first, and you can take that away if you want to, Chris.
No, I'm happy to answer it. The short answer is we are investing more police. In previous budgets, we invested in 60 more, and we don't want them stuck behind a desk. So if we built a new police station tomorrow and had to man it with all these extra policing resources, they would not be out there on the beat. So all of those extra policing resources that will be used throughout the city will be used to respond to operational need on the beat, out there in their vehicle. We've given them and equipped them with that latest technology so that they can work from the vehicle. And they're out there, visible in the community, responding to instances of crime that have been reported by the community. So that's where we want them. And that's where our investment is going, and it's part of a policing model, a new policing model that we're implementing at the moment. So hopefully you'll see those resources out there.
Okay, the other question from this fellow is about because of criminal motor vehicle behaviour in Molongo. Are you proposing to use any CCTV, etc.? Are you proposing to move on to strengthening powers such as impounding the vehicles of repeat offenders? And we said, say on Holder, they put the bollards down at the open and they're driving around on it. So things like that.
Yeah, so the Police Minister and I have been having a discussion about motor vehicle crime, including theft, but also speeding offences at the moment. My department's actually doing a review into penalties under our Road Transport Act, looking at whether they're proportionate to the crime and whether we need to update those, fill in any missing gaps that exist compared to the offences that are available in other jurisdictions for police to use to respond to that crime. And the Police Minister is particularly interested in the issue of vehicle theft. There's been some recent court cases that I think have demonstrated a problem in being able to use the circumstantial evidence available to prosecute people for motor vehicle theft crimes. And so we're looking at how we can respond to that, looking at some new offences that we can use to make sure that those people are prosecuted and do get a sentence.
Of course, that does
flow into insurance premiums. I was talking to a young woman today who's just moved to Canberra. White nondescript Toyota Corolla, cost her $600 to insure in Queensland. Comes here, just got a quote, end up $1,200. So she's going, what's going on? I said, that's why I told you, put your car off the road, put it in the garage, off the street. It's got an impact on people's family budgets, and it's quite a shock.
There's no doubt that people's behaviour on the road affects insurance premiums. We're actually working with the taxi industry at the moment who have very high insurance premiums compared to what usual motorists pay on improving the safety of taxi drivers to help bring down their insurance premiums. They crash their vehicles more than any other person and they're out on the road more often. So that's going to be through a new handbook that we'll work with the industry. Queensland's done this and it's worked there. So, but certainly we've been also trying to bring down insurance premiums. The change from the old CTP system to the Motor Accidents Injuries Insurance scheme that we now have in place has brought premiums down, which is really good news. The moves a few years ago to introduce competition into the market has also worked, where people can choose which third-party insurer they want. Has also provided competition, and you've seen GIO trying to reduce their premium below NRMA to get market share and vice versa all the time now, which is great. But certainly people's behaviour matters. We want people to be safe, and that benefits everyone in terms of lower premiums.
Any question?
We've got time for more?
There's one for Rose and
All right, I'll ask a quick one. Thanks very much, Chris. So my question just relates to the new traffic lights that are going in around Weston Creek on Stream Drive and Hindmarsh Drive. So I think we all know that these are very dangerous intersections, and I suspect the traffic lights will make that much safer. I guess the other element there is so about speed of travel, and I think maybe people sort of suspect that traffic lights might slow people down. And the other sort of thing I wanted to discuss was pedestrian access. So those roads can be quite difficult to cross. Will those traffic lights sort of...
I might reserve the answer to those questions, because I know Jeremy's got all the answers there in some detail about what the benefits are and the feasibility studies that were undertaken on a couple of those intersections, which has informed the approach that we're planning on taking with signalisation around traffic lights. So that goes to time of travel, it goes to pedestrian access, and it goes to making sure that the road network functions in the way that we want it to, especially with the growth in population. And I noticed the new development signage going up, Featherston development right next to the intersection that we're talking about tonight as well. So there's going to be a lot more people living around that area, and that's part of the reason why these intersections have been put forward for improvement, as well as the sort of safety and crash history behind it, which Jeremy can explain further.
Rose, do you have a question?
Oh, I've got a question, have I?
I told you.
Okay, it's trees and path repairs. I'm a member of the Featherston Gardens Friends Volunteers who maintain Featherston Gardens on Hyson Street, Weston. We are supported by TCCS in mowing. A huge call out to Daniel and his team from the Holder Depot, and the delivery of wood chip to suppress weeds and maintain moisture in the gardens. The group of volunteers have completed approximately 1,500 hours of volunteer work, or $50,000 worth of free work on a base salary for these gardens over the last 12 months by undertaking weeding, planting, pruning, coordinating work with CCS, following up outstanding work, etc. We have been successful in winning 3 grants from these gardens in the last year. One, we may have to return to the AC Trees team, have not removed dead and dying trees along Hyson Street. We have requested the removal of these trees for well over 3 years. My question to you is, can you intervene and speed this up? Just so you know, we have also requested that paths be replaced or repaired, as with the excessive rain earlier this year and poor planning with Featherston Ridge was developed. We now have major health and safety hazard through the gardens. We are aware that a budget bid was put in for this repair.
Okay. Yeah.
Would you like that written out? And you can take it
that would be great. Yeah, I'll pass on the good feedback to Daniel Iglesias and the team at TCCS about their work with you and the team out of Featherston Gardens. It's fantastic to see the volunteers there for so many years doing a great job. And yeah, look, in relation to the issues that you raised, I'm happy to talk to the tree team about the dead and dying trees. They've had a massive piece of work that they've had to do in the first half of this year, which is to fix, I think, over 3,000 trees that had come down or were damaged as part of the supercell in Belconnen. So that has been a major piece of work for them. We've had to pull in parks and cons as well to help with that effort. So they're only now just getting it on top of the rest of the trees around Canberra that were sort of less, from a safety point of view, less at risk of injuring people. But certainly I can raise that with them and see where that's at in terms of the program, coming to assess them, the ones that need to be yet to be assessed as well.
I realise that.
Yep.
This has been from 3 years ago, it's
Sure.
not happening in the last 6 months.
Yeah, no, I think we've had quite a bit of an impact on that team, and I am certainly looking at how we can better resource that team going forward. We're actually augmenting Holder Depot at the moment, so there's an expansion and upgrade to that depot to accommodate 11 extra staff in the Treescapes team who will be doing a lot of that work, planting new trees, as well as, of course, helping to maintain our existing urban forest as well. So happy to raise that and the other issues as well around the erosion and sort of runoff issue that you had. Yeah.
My question was different on the buses. They thought I was going to say the same thing. I was comparing electric and solar buses. Solar buses are probably going a lot cheaper with a battery backup than the electric buses, because you need your chargers for electric buses, you don't with the solar buses. Have you considered switching to that?
Look, we're in procurement for the buses, so there might be a range of different technology providers that come forward to offer a range of different technologies. It could be battery electric buses, it could be hydrogen fuel cell buses. It's possible that there could be technology with solar panels that you're starting to see emerge on some being built into electric vehicles and potentially heavy vehicles as well. I haven't seen that locally in Australia, that type of bus technology being used, but the electric buses, they're very large batteries. They take a lot of power to charge. With the Woden depot, we're having to put in new transformers, working with Evo Energy on a direct feeder line to ensure that we've got a reliable, large-scale supply of electricity. It's around 11 kilovolt lines, which is significant compared to what's currently going in there. So it requires quite a significant augmentation of the grid, not just purchasing the buses themselves. Of course, as part of that, we'll look at solar panels on the roof of the depot to help charge the buses as well, but that won't be able to feed all of the energy in. These very large batteries on wheels, and so we're going to need to draw some electricity from the broader grid as well to help charge the batteries. And that'll be done in a variety of different ways, and we're working with each of the providers around whether it's overhead gantry charging from the roof of the depot, or whether it's just a sort of plug-in from the electric vehicle chargers that we'll be putting in as part of the upgrades as well. So
would it be the same as the batteries that are in our cars now, that they just charge themselves as well?
Well, no, because they're pure electric, so they don't have a diesel motor. In addition to, it's not a hybrid. There are hybrid buses around that we did trial a few years ago, but at the end of the day, the electric vehicles is where we need to go because they're zero emissions for scope 1 and 2 emissions, and so we need to move to that type of technology. It's cleaner, it's deadly quiet, you can't hear these buses coming, which is something that we actually have to address to make sure that people who do have hearing issues can actually hear them coming. So we're working on that with the bus providers as well. But certainly we're hoping to get the latest technology here with electric buses, and we've got 12 coming from Yutong, a Chinese manufacturer, and then 8 coming from Yutong and 4 coming from Custom Denning, which is an Australian manufactured bus. So we're hoping that we'll be able to test out a range of different models as well in the fleet.
Are there any more questions for Chris, or are you just all waiting to get onto Brearley Street? Oh, thank you, Chris.
Yes, I am. Yeah,
So, you're on. You should do your presentation.
Yeah, and we can start that with Anna. Hi, I'm Sophie Clement. I'm working at TCCS in the infrastructure delivery team. So I think, as you all know, the government announced a $1.5 million budget for the Brearley Street upgrade last year. That comes off the back, I think in 2014, the Weston Group Centre Master Plan was completed. TCCS undertook some feasibility and concept options for taking the public domain upgrades from the master plan and starting to look at what those are and prioritise those for delivery. Off the back of that, we did deliver the upgrades to Trenery Square in sort of 2017-18, and then last year we came back to the community and asked you some questions about what you'd like to see in terms of upgrades on Brearley Street. So we definitely see Brearley Street as the next priority in terms of upgrades to the public domain here at the Western Creek Group Centre. And the sorts of things we heard from you last year were around improved trees, like more trees and landscaping, improving the pedestrian amenity and safety and accessibility on Brearley Street. There was definitely a keenness for improved amenity and lighting, and things like opportunities for enlivening the streets, so alfresco dining and widening the verges. So since then, we've engaged a design consultant, Place Laboratory, who are here with us tonight, and they've taken that feedback. They've done some site investigations and feasibility work, and they've also come and talked to the community council and to some of the traders and businesses in the area to develop a concept option for what we think is best in terms of an upgrade of Brearley Street. So we did look at options in terms of turning it to a shared zone, going one way, and we sort of went through all of those options at the moment, and what we've come out with is retaining the two-way street, but looking at ways that we can start to widen the verges, and so hopefully that narrows and reduces the speeds on the street, and looking at things like bringing in more trees and landscaping and making that opportunity for outdoor dining as well. Importantly, there'll be some pedestrian crossings to help start to improve the safety for pedestrians in the area, and hopefully through those measures we'll see slower traffic and maybe a little bit less busy on the vehicle side and more busy on the people side. So I think I'll hand over to Anna once we get the presentation. Some technology assistance here.
I'll answer something.
So while this is happening, I guess I should say we're at the point now where we want to talk to the community about the concept options, and I guess that's part of why we're here tonight. I think it was yesterday we opened up on Your Say and have shared the concept options with the community, and there's a survey on there, and we definitely want to hear from you about what you think around what we're proposing, and just to share with you where we're at in the project as well. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Anna from Place Laboratory, and we're the landscape architects that have been preparing the Brearley Street concept. And as Sophie said, like a lot of our initial work was actually about sort of understanding what the future of Brearley Street could be, whether it's a shared street or a one-way or a two-way. And then we basically used what we actually gathered from that feasibility to help us develop what we can do in this stage of work that won't actually get in the way of the future of the street. And so we had right up at the beginning, like developed up a strategy about how we were going to approach our design. And really we wanted to think about how people were going to arrive in the space, what we were going to do to encourage them to stay, and then the third strategy was about getting people to come back again and to visit Brearley Street. So the base of our next slide. The base of our design is actually comes from the community voice, and so we went back through all of the consultation that has occurred over the last 3 or 4 years, and sort of really pulled out the key moves, and really we heard that we wanted more trees and green in the street, that there needed to be more spaces for outdoor dining, improved seating, better lighting, particularly on the pedestrian crossings, improved pedestrian safety, wider verges and lower speed limits, and it to be family friendly and with more play areas, paving improvements for pedestrian safety, and also a recognisable character that was really belonged to Weston Creek and not anywhere else. We had a workshop maybe about 3 months ago, and some of the people in the room today were actually at that workshop, and we just did a quick summary of what we actually heard at that workshop. Is that there was a bit of support from the group about turning Brearley Street into a one-way street. There was a lot of discussion about that, and it felt that turning it into a one-way street actually started to address some of those urban design qualities that we discussed on that had come up from previous consultation. There was concern about the budget of the street and how it was being allocated, and then there was also conversations about the northern end of Brilliant Street getting quite congested with the petrol station and also the loading dock coming into the Woolworths. There was also a discussion that Weston Creek has quite an older population, and so that we had to make sure that whatever we did was actually supporting those residents, and that everyone thought that Weston Creek was a welcoming place. It was homey and pleasant, and there was a lot of discussion about trees, and it was a consensus that there was you didn't want to see any more eucalypts, and that it was to be a deciduous tree, and there was a bit of discussion about Weston Creek being a little bit unsafe at times, and Brearley Street itself with the traffic was a little bit noisy. So I'm just going to run through the design at the moment. And so basically what we've done is we've taken a concept where we've sort of thought about how the street was going to be structured. And so we're really drawing upon the character of Weston Creek to kind of help us actually build this picture of what Brearley Street could look like. And so and we did draw quite heavily upon the suburban character of Weston Creek. And so we started to think that the building blocks were like the trees and the pathways, and that we would use those to create living rooms or garden rooms, and they would be welcoming spaces to stop and stay. And then we would furnish those rooms with seating and tables, and then we would use a palette of materials that was comfortable and had character, and then we would add in the idea of a garden with layers of green planters and pots, and a mix of native and exotic plants. And so we've started to apply those to the concept. And this is the overall site, and we basically have 4 key areas that we're concentrating on. We have Brearley Street North, which is basically from the petrol station back to Treasury Square. Then we have Brearley Street Centre, which is the entry into the Coolamon Court, and some upgrades to Treasury Square to address some of the issues that have been identified, and then Brearley Street South, which is extending to the where there's not a crosswalk yet, but there will be one in the future. But there's the existing NIMS located, and there's a little laneway that is this little laneway just here. And then we've got a small section up in the northern car park just to address some of the tricky sort of traffic movements that are happening in that area. And so just quickly running through each of those areas and the key design moves. So the main design move about the northern upgrade is widening the existing footpath outside of the Lava Cafe and the restaurants there, and really extending it out like another 2.5 metres, so that we can really create some really great outdoor dining spaces. We've added in trees, a structure of trees, and they will sit in garden beds, and they start to form these outdoor garden rooms that we were talking about. The other key change is actually adding in a pedestrian crossing, and that would that's located in the centre of the road. And placing that was actually quite a tricky exercise because we had to sort of think about how the trucks were going to be moving through that area, and also accommodating some buses in the short term. And then and we're removing the loading zone that is located outside the real estate agent, and that will be actually have parking reinstated in there. And then we're actually they're going to relocate the bus stop back up into Parkinson, and that will have car parking in it as well. The next one is the centre, and so we're going to do some improvements to Trinity Square. That includes adding battens onto the seats, and so that we can try and make them a little bit more comfortable. We're going to add in some plants and some garden beds, some trees, and we'll also add in some proper tables that people can sit at and enjoy the space. We're going to do the same on the other side of the road as well, like add in some, put in some new trees and a table setting just opposite the entry into the shopping centre. And I suppose I just wanted to make a quick comment, is that this with this design, we realise that there's been quite a lot of commentary about it, but what we've tried to do in the new work is really respond to some of the geometry of that design, but try and actually bring in materials that are a lot more comfortable and have a lot more character, and so it feels a little bit more like a place where you would like to stop and stay. And so we didn't want to create two completely different spaces. So we've acknowledged the arcs on the walls but tried to kind of at the same time move away from it, so to create something that you can be proud of. The last section is the south, and really in this space we're just improving the street tree planting. We're going to improve the pavements and add in some more seating and rubbish bins, and the key to this is also to formalise that pedestrian crossing that aligns with the laneway and really bookend the street with two crossings that really make it a safe and slow pedestrian environment. And then in the northern car park, one of the comments that we had is that at the moment that exit is actually quite dangerous, because people actually, when they're exiting from there, have to move into the opposite side of the street, and so we're going to close that down, and it's just simply putting in some bollards and some line marking in there, and it could be for a large vehicle parking. And that is kind of getting us ready for the opportunity to actually to move the trucks that come into the Woolworths loading zone out of Brearley Street and move them into and Street, and so that we can keep Brearley Street a slow vehicle street with no heavy vehicles going up it other than buses. And this is a perspective, and so we're just sort of like standing out in front of, just down from the Lava Cafe here, looking up the street. We can see the new pedestrian crossing, and you can just make out the cockatoo mural on the Woolworths wall, and you can see that we've created these little garden rooms where the tenants can bring out tables and chairs. We've got a nice clear path for pedestrians to move down the shop front, and as part of these garden rooms, we've added in quite a bit of seating, so there's lots of opportunity for people to stop and stay and use those spaces. This gives you a bit of a rundown of the materials. We're being quite environmentally responsible in this project. We're actually looking at seeing how many materials we can actually reuse and recycle, and really we're going to try and upcycle everything, and that includes the brick paving and some of the concrete. And and you can see the timber, the batten benches. That's okay. It's fine. And then I know the hot topic is trees. Oh, right, then I'm saved. It disappeared. I know that there's a lot of conversation about the pistachio. They are going to be a male tree only. And that was the direction from Urban Trees. That's what their preference is. So, and that will be the structural tree planting down the street, and then with a couple of elms planted into the Trainery Square just to complement the ones that are there already. And that's the end of the presentation.
Right. Same forward.
My concern is with all that paving, it gets very hot in the summertime, and they're going to make the areas extremely hot. People won't be able to sit out there. It'll be really, really hot. And it's not helping our fight to lower this climate change problem that we're having at the moment. That's going to add to it. I don't think anyone's really thought this out properly, so maybe if you sit down thinking, and also narrowing Riley Street is already causing traffic congestion. Narrowing Riley Street is going to cause more traffic congestion. So I understand you have addressed our concerns about people driving on the wrong side in that car park, but it's not alleviating the traffic congestion problem, which directed people going through White Street and so through another street. It's still going to have big problems for those driving down that street and access to the post office and all the businesses that are there. So hopefully you sort of sit down and have a rethink about all that pavement that we want to put down. It's not going to be good for climate change.
The actual road, the road width actually doesn't really change in terms of the traffic lanes, and so we're really very much keeping that as is existing. And what has happened as part of the Trainery Square, there's a bit of a disconnect between where the indented curb is, and so there's quite a lot of road pavement that actually is not really performing or doing anything. And so the idea is that we'll extend the footpath out and then actually add in, I think that we've got something like, I'm going to say a number, about 15 extra trees going into Brearley Street where there's actually no trees at the moment, and then also quite a lot of planting and garden bed to try and create that cooling down of the urban heat. So we are, but I hear you, and I think that what will also happen is that, you know, in the short term, there, you know, when the trees are young, that there might need to be some shade, some additional shade in that space.
Val's got a question.
Okay, hi, just a question. You talk about coffee tables and what have you outside for the tenants.
Yes.
What about permanent ones when the tenants are closed at weekends and that sort of thing?
So we actually do have if you go to Brearley Street North, it's a bit hard for me to point, but we've actually added in table settings in here. But also where we've got where we have seats built into the brick wall, we've actually put like a little round table, and so when you sit, you can actually two people can sit at a little table. So there's and yeah, you can kind of just make it out in that image. So we try to include as much public seating in that space as we possibly can. And in addition to that, we also are adding in extra tables into Trinity Square as well. So there'll be 3 extra tables in that space.
And shade for them?
Yes, so they will go under the canopy, the existing canopies, and so we'll take out the benches that are there at the moment and put tables, and then we're planning to actually grow vines up the side of the canopies, and so that they'll be eventually sort of covered in green and be softened quite a bit.
And in the northern part, you say the indentation's going to be taken up by trees, so that's about 15 less car parks.
No, actually, we're pretty even with the car parking. The car parking is we're pushing out the curb, and then we're pushing out the car parking into that sort of no man's land that exists there at the moment. So there's no loss of parking.
There will be an adjustment with the arrangement of the parking, but the parking numbers will stay the same. Yeah. And you might have to go use the pedestrian crossing over to the eastern side to get to a car park to say go to the Lava Cafe, but the numbers will be the same. Yeah.
So I'll put in an advertisement here, come back in September when they're presenting on parking about.
Yeah, yes, that's true.
We've got a bit like they're waiting.
Firstly, thank you for this. It's looking quite lovely, and it's great to see trees back in. And after what happened with Trenery Court, and how really nobody uses it because it's so hot and ugly, softening that is great. But my question is, how long will it take to build all of this? What is the timing of that building, and is it in the budget?
Yeah. So we were allocated a budget last year through the ACT government budget, and that was $1.5 million, and that's for all of the project costs, including construction. The design that we've come up with here, we can deliver within that budget, and that does allow for some contingency and the current sort of market conditions. What we're expecting is that we'll be in a position to look at getting a construction tender out before the end of this calendar year is the idea, so that we would see this going into construction definitely next year. That'll just depend on the refinement of the design process, so it'll either be we're out to tender before the end of the year or early next year, and definitely start the construction next year.
Great, thank you.
Yes.
Hi, thanks very much. We've had a couple of questions come in from our live feed. So the first one is question around closing the northern car park entrance there, and whether that will force more vehicles to travel by the entrance of the shopping centre, and whether that might be a bit of a risk to pedestrian safety.
So you mean the entrance down here on Greeley Street?
No, so I think we're talking about the northern car park one.
Yep.
So at the moment those vehicles, I guess, travel through that space.
So they're going to come down in front of the...
So I think, yeah, it's sort of forcing them sort of closer to the right there, to the shopping centre. I think the concern is just that there's a bit more pedestrian activity on that side of the car park.
So my understanding is with the closure at the top end there is it actually starts to improve the circulation of the vehicles in the car park. So I would anticipate that it's not going to necessarily push more vehicles down in front of the main pedestrian area.
Sure.
I'd anticipate you get people coming down and then looping up as they would, but it resolves that conflict issue up in the top area there.
Great. And just two others. So there's a question around whether the speed limit on Greeley Street will be lowered along with this work. And then just also a final one regarding whether there's been consideration around the trees dropping leaves and then the contribution to water pollution from the nutrient loading of those.
Oh, do you have the speed limit? I don't have the speed limit off the top of my head, but I think at the moment it's 40 kilometres an hour. And we haven't actually, in our plans, addressed whether that was going to change, and so we just maintain it at 40. In terms of the leaf litter, the trees are deciduous, and so they will lose their leaves. But we would be putting some gross pollutant traps on the. We're doing a small little modification to the to one of the stormwater site entry pits, and so we can organise to have that have a gross pollutant trap in it. And then also the island, the little nymphs that we've got that create the crosswalk, they will be rain gardens, and so with the idea that the water will flow into those rain gardens and keep those plants alive.
Great, thank you very much.
I don't know if I answered that question, but anyway.
It's looking promising, but I have a concern. Is my understanding correct that you're going to close the road that comes out by the Woolworths corner where their loading dock is?
No, we're not. No.
Okay. So, and well, I thought you made a comment that you're going to send
Am I right to answer that?
Okay, you can answer that one, yeah.
So I think the team looked at what could be done at that intersection, because it is quite a complex intersection in terms of the different movements and certainly the heavy vehicles that utilise the loading zone. At the moment, it was too difficult to address, I suppose, for the scope and size of this project, and so we couldn't quite get a resolution to work, and that's where we landed with the widening of the verge, the pedestrian crossing at that end to address the safety issue for pedestrians crossing the road at that end, which I think is one of the issues that comes from the large vehicles using the loading zone. So we did look at that. It's quite complex, and I think the best outcome that we came up with was to get a safe crossing point for pedestrians at that point, and also an opportunity for starting to create a more slow street, people-focused environment.
Okay, it's just that I thought you said you were going to put the Woolworths trucks out in Lydia Street, and I thought, how are they going to unload out there?
No, not at this point.
No.
I guess it was looking at options for can they eventually come through that northern car park entrance and around, but at the moment there's not a way that we can make that work.
You can't do that. Sorry, thank you.
Yeah. Look, I'm not entirely persuaded that you're going to be able to calm the traffic. Now, really straight after dark, I'd love to make a movie about it. It looks like one of those Russian dash cam videos. Horrible stuff's happening out there. And I just don't see how what you've got up there is going to deal with it. My second concern is with the car parks, especially the bit behind Woolworths. We put a sign up that says 10 kilometres an hour. I invite anybody to go down there and actually look at traffic doing 10 kilometres an hour. I regularly have to pull my toes back in when I'm doing my shopping. They're meant to stop. Now, notionally, the car parks are 50 kilometre hour zones because they're road-related areas. Our default speed limit is 50. Yet the street's 40. It may go to 30. So I'm a bit confused, I'm just not convinced. And secondly, I don't see enough there to stop the vehicle conflict with the pedestrians. But happy to suck it and see, it's better than what we've got. I think we can go a little bit further. Another comment I saw online, it's a general comment, it's a shame we haven't got into renewable energy with these projects, as in put an awning over the top, put some solar panels on, feed it into the grid or feed it into power the lights. The rain garden's a good idea, but you could also take the water off those roofs and feed it into the plants. So that's a question we had online, or discussion point I saw. So I'll let you respond if you want, or take it on board, Sophie.
So I'll pick up first the concerns around slowing the traffic on the street. And I think one of the things that Anna has referred to is in terms of widening the verge down at the northern end there. What Anna was explaining is that the road is very wide, so you'll notice that those parking bays, there's actually a lot of room. There's probably room to park 2 cars side by side and then have the 2 vehicle lanes and have the parking lane on the other side. So that very wide road environment certainly feeds to people the idea that they can drive more quickly. And so I think, although it might be hard to see here, I wouldn't undervalue what the narrowing of that road environment will do. And then on top of that, you've got the blisters coming out for the pedestrian crossings, and you're starting to create a more complex environment, which I know does exist more at the southern end, but I hear what you're saying, that there's still a speed issue. But once we start to create that more complexity and activity in a longer stretch of the street, we should start to see the vehicles' behaviour, or the driver's behaviour in the vehicles starting to change. And on top of that, you start to bring in the vertical structures with the trees and the plantings, and hopefully we're also getting more people in the area, so there's more people crossing the road in those positions, so cars, they start to develop that pattern of behaviour and know that they're used to seeing someone crossing the road there, and they start to anticipate that in terms of regular users of the road environment. So I hear your concerns, but I think that these sorts of measures that we see, which we call traffic calming measures in terms of changing that urban environment, can be pretty effective. So that was, I guess, that first question. But we'll certainly take that on board and make sure that we have another look at it to see that it is going to achieve that safe environment that we're after. Then you'll have to remind me the other questions. There was the solar,
The solar, and there was also the car park.
And the car park.
Shared zones in the car park. Why is there only one little shared zone when you've got acres of cleared land for cars?
And I don't know, and I think you're talking about the ramp there that is the southern entry into the, And so I don't know the history of that shared zone, unfortunately, but I can certainly take that on notice and come back with some more information around it. But I understand it would have been delivered there to try and create a safer environment for pedestrians, because there's not a lot of path area through that car park.
I guess I'm suggesting the message hasn't got through. I didn't see anybody in the audience argue with me, so I think I'm right. And if they say I'm wrong, I'm still right.
And I guess we've been focused on the upgrade of Greeley Street, so we haven't really taken the pedestrians in that car park into consideration as a part of the scope of this project. Some of the thinking that came out of that northern car park intervention with that entry-exit for vehicles came out of trying to address the issue with the vehicles at the loading dock. So it's actually sort of a subsidiary that's probably not as relevant to the Greeley Street upgrade, which might be taking the focus away. And then the solar and the opportunities for that. So I think Anna mentioned that we will reuse and relay the paving along Greeley Street in terms of a reuse and a recycle sort of opportunity. We haven't looked at solar lighting here. ACT government is undertaking some trials of solar lighting for some of our public lighting parks. And we can certainly look at how that trial's going and if there's any opportunity to bring any of that across to Greeley Street in terms of the street lighting. And I'm not sure that we've done investigations into feeding power back into the grid at this stage. I can certainly see if that's something the government has been thinking about.
I would have thought with the big camera battery announcement, you'd be looking for every bit of spare voltage you could at the daytime to power the new buses, which I fully support. And it's also a great chance to, I see it as the next step of making Greeley Street an exciting little precinct, to do a few little things that could get people talking. Because at the moment, what you're doing is good, but it wouldn't take much to go that extra step.
You're looking for a hook, is that?
Oh, I've got my hook. Sorry, Chris, I'm coming to talk to you separately.
Yeah, but I mean a hook for the community to feel engaged by it.
We've got on another project that we're working on, we're doing, we have no power coming to the site at all, and it's all been and it's all being done through solar. So it's definitely something that's starting to happen, and we can talk to our lighting designer and see if we can do that. The lighting that we have at the moment is very specifically related to the crosswalks, to really make sure that we've got the right lighting levels on those crosswalks. So that absolutely we can have a chat to them about seeing if we can move to solar for those lights.
Yeah, and talk to our asset area about that.
Oh,
yeah.
yes.
yes. And see how we're going with the trial that we're doing. Yeah.
Just a question about the Woolies trucks. I mean, I've seen them come down from the southern end of William Street into the car park and then reverse into the docks. Have you watched them do it?
Yeah.
Swabbing to the side of the truck. So if there are not going to be any trucks on Real Street, well, how are they going to?
I think that might have been a red herring, that comment that actually spoke about how we ended up with the little intervention in the northern car park. So there will still be trucks on Greeley Street, and the loading zone will still be used in the same way that it is now. We're not anticipating a change to that use through what we're doing with these upgrades.
And the bus depot in Real Street, is that going to be still the same?
The bus layover will still be opposite the service station where it is at the moment. At the moment, that's the best location for that facility for our bus drivers.
But the one further up opposite, say, Luton's?
Opposite which? Sorry?
So opposite the real estate agent, so further up opposite Trinity.
The bus stop?
Up there.
The bus stop. So that bus stop will move. It will move up to Parkinson Street, which is where Transport Canberra have been starting to focus their, not interchange, but their sort of their bus activity and the bus stops. Yeah.
I know I've got another question. Buses. It's a mystery to me why, if you're not stopping them there, why you're parking them there. And I know there's a new network coming, but there's this little brick secret building down there. We all wonder what's going on with it, but it's perhaps real estate that could be put to a better use in the future. Okay, I said not now, but I'm just making noises that we might go, hey, when are you actually going to say to the guys, there's other facilities around here you go to, but more importantly, the consultation on the stage 2 disability reforms is going on, and part of it talks about moving taxis to be near buses under the heading of whole of journey. They've been talking whole of journey. I tuned into a conversation with Graham Minnis the other day, and they're going hard on that, and that would be one of the recommendations. So is the taxi zone staying, or is it moving, or what's happening?
It's staying, is that right, with a reduced capacity?
So what we resolved, as you mentioned before, there's actually a parking study that is being undertaken at the moment, and we picked up on that comment at our last meeting, and it was decided that the taxi would be assessed as part of that parking study. And so we have to just make sure that that message has been forwarded on. So
to the colleagues who have come in September to expect that question.
We'll do, okay.
Just another clarification. You said the loading zones are going to be moved. Is that near the newsagents there?
That's the loading zone out the front of the real estate agent, and what we understand from our investigation is that loading zone was there based on the historical use of that space as a carpet. And so it's not actually being used as a loading zone at the moment. It's so the idea is that that would become parking.
Okay, thanks. That's the other one.
talking about parking and trying to get people to stay, we only have a 2-hour car park limit on most of the car parks there. Is that going to change?
So probably, do you mean the car parks on Brearley Street?
No, the whole area.
Yeah.
Well, what's going to be on Brearley Street? I would just imagine that was going to be 15 minutes.
Yeah, so we would look at Brearley Street being a shorter turnaround to encourage that drop-in, the takeaway, that sort of activity. In terms of the other timing, as a part of the Brearley Street upgrade consultation, TCCS is also consulting on parking arrangements at Coolman Court, and so in terms of the timed parking, if you participate in that part of the consultation process, and hopefully out of that process we'll have some more information and confirmation about what the timed parking will be in the long term. Yeah.
Are there any other questions? You come back in September for that vote. Any more questions there from anybody who hasn't asked a question? Lee, you've got nothing on mine? Okay, thank you very much. I will call the conversation closed. We've got the consultation going on through the Have Your Say facility. We've sent the links out in emails, it's on our website, it's all over the place. So feel free to go for it. And we will also be lodging a submission on it as well, based on what you tell us. So if you tell us nothing, we'll just have to put up with whatever we put in. So I really want to get some input. We've had some great input of late on these conversations. So thank you to all our speakers tonight. I really enjoyed it. Taken a lot out of it. It's good to see this work progressing. Thank you again, Chris, for coming out. I know you're busy. Good. You got something?
Intersections?
Oh,
do you want to talk about?
Yeah, we put a prop down on the one down there today. Did you see it?
No, I didn't.
Look, there's a half a cap tea at the bottom of it down there.
I'm conscious of time, so I won't take up too much. Jeremy Smith from Transport Chemistry Services, same team as Sophie, Infrastructure Delivery. So just really quickly in relation to parking, as Bill and the team have said, we've committed to come back in September and talk about parking. Bill has shared a couple of plans on the Weston Creek Community Council webpage where it's got some of the indicative ideas around the parking and the timing and some of the time changes, so that we jump in there, have a bit of a look and then come back in September for a more detailed update on that. What I did want to talk about though is intersections. So we've had a couple of questions in relation to the intersections. One tonight, and there's quite a few questions online as well, on Facebook pages, etc., in regards to what's happening with the intersections. As the Minister had pointed out a little bit earlier, we are conducting an upgrade of 3 intersections in Weston Creek. They are the Stream Drive and Namatjira Drive intersection, the Stream Drive Hastings Street intersection, as well as the Hindmarsh Brearley Street intersection. A little bit of history on those over the last 5 years, a little bit of crash data. So Namatjira Street and Drive, there's been 21 crashes there, 4 involving injuries, as well as 17 property damages relating to that intersection. Hastings Street, there's been 14 crashes, 1 which resulted in an injury and 13 property damages, and then Hindmarsh Brearley, which is the one the Minister had identified as a black spot, which has got the joint federal funding as well, on the basis that it's been identified as a black spot. It's had 21 collisions resulting in 7 injuries, including 2 of those being hospitalisations, and a total of 5 receiving medical treatment, be that at a local medical facility or via ambulances. So there's quite a crash history with those. There may be some other intersections which have similar sort of crash histories as well, but they may carry less vehicles, and therefore we make a decision to fund or invest in those ones that carry more traffic, because they're likely to result in more accidents as they move forward as well. The investment in these intersections is a recognition of the growing area as well, the more traffic on the road, etc. And then the classic question we have is, what's the treatment that we're putting in? So there has been feasibility studies on all three of these intersections to look at how they perform, what their function serves within the road network, who uses them. So when I say who uses them, is it cars, is it bikes, is it pedestrians as well? So we look at all those aspects. We also look at things like freight movement as well. So a little bit of information. All three of these intersections form part of the B-double route, or the heavy vehicle route in Canberra. Past a couple of the intersections, only particular sorts of B-double vehicles are allowed to pass them. So past Brearley Street up to, I can't remember what is it, in the High Marsh Drive, they can only take stock vehicles and forestry vehicles. And again, between Namatjira Drive and High Marsh Drive, they can only take stock and forestry vehicles as well, but the rest of the network can take general freight B-doubles as well. On the basis of what uses those intersections, including heavy vehicles, normal cars, buses, pedestrians and cyclists, the feasibility studies showed us that signalisation of those intersections is a more beneficial outcome. The reason for that is it allows that safe crossing for pedestrians, particularly across Street and Drive, where you've got people moving from the suburbs back down to the group centre. It also allows that active travel element as well for cyclists getting through. A roundabout generally doesn't give the safe provision for a pedestrian to move across the intersection, and it doesn't particularly give a safe provision for cyclists moving through those intersections as well. When you've got a B-double moving through those intersections, if you've got a roundabout, it is actually quite difficult for the B-double to make that manoeuvring through the roundabout, and it takes a lot more real estate as well for us to put those roundabouts in. With the signalisation of the intersections, we can actually use a lot of the amenity or the asset that is there now, and it's just a matter of going in, putting the traffic lights up, doing some minor lane changes, putting the loops into the road, whereas when we put the roundabouts in, we would actually have to take quite a bit of that real estate on the verges of the road as well. Roundabouts can actually be quite a lengthy process for us to install as well, with the traffic control and stuff like that, whereas the signalisation is actually quite often do a little bit quicker as well. So that's the reason why we're driving towards the signalised intersections rather than roundabouts. I know it's been a hot topic online. I guess the other thing for us as well as road operators as well, it's about and the cost is not dramatically different between the roundabout due to the nature and the amount of asset we need to create and add. And the question, I guess, one of the questions for us now is, do we invest now for our future, or do we come in and do we do a little bit of a stopgap, put a roundabout in, and then come back in 5, 10, 15, 20 years' time, and leave our kids to deal with it and stuff like that as well. So that's sort of where we're at. Next steps for us will be, we'll move through detailed design in the next 3 to 5 months. We'll then come out with construction tenders later in the year or early next year. We'll let the community know when those things are happening, and we'll keep the community updated through the engagement process, and then we'll move into construction. We would expect construction to probably take around about 6 to 9 months. And that will just be depending on how much traffic control we need to do in the area. Happy to take questions.
I'll go first, which is chasing with the mic. The northbound side of Street and Drive, I'm scratching myself on a T intersection why you need to stop the northbound traffic flow completely.
So
I'm not persuaded.
Yeah. So the northbound traffic flow flowing through towards Coat Road.
Yeah.
Yep. So with any signalised intersection, you need to give the safe opportunity for vehicles to enter into the traffic flow. We also are looking at the safe amenity for pedestrian crossing as well. If we don't allow the traffic to stop there, you don't actually end up with that safe pedestrian movement across that side of Street and Drive. By stopping the traffic, you actually give a decent gap in the traffic. We are aware of the community here in Weston Creek as well. The Minister himself identified that there are some elderly residents as well. I think it's safer to stop that traffic, give them a good chance to cross the road. And we've got kids as well crossing as well. So.
But the next question is, have you had a good look at the Mully Street intersection?
I can't say I have.
We had earlier questions about becoming an informal bus interchange for private schools. You've got a very active school there with, I assume there's 500 or 600 kids, maybe more, plus all the other health and allied professional job tasks on there. It's quite busy, and there's some great near misses on there. I'm just curious, really, has there been a safety audit of it? Would there be? Is somebody actually monitoring it? I'm always seeing broken glass there in Weston.
Yeah, so there would have been safety assessments done of that intersection in the past 5 years. On the City Services webpage, you can actually go in and see the ranking of intersections in Canberra as to whether they fall into the top 100 intersections in regards to safety and operation. If that one is on there, you'll be able to actually see the ranking of it on there. I was mainly taking some notes when the Minister was talking as well, and I noted the Mully Street comment both in relation to parking, noted the comment about buses as well. So I'm more than happy to go back to the team and have a chat to them about that. Also go back and have a look at the rankings as well.
I'll add speed in the school zone in the first block between Street and Drive and Blackwood Terrace. That is also an issue along there that I regularly hear about and observe.
Yeah, so we have an opportunity to go back and we can definitely talk to the Office of Regulatory Services about that to see what they can do in relation to their, the engagement with speed bans, but also their engagement with the police as well.
My comment question is on Hyson Street. Hyson Street now has a school. The Islamic school is tucked in there. And when the school was opened, the entrance to that school was meant to be from Unland Place, not from Hyson Street. So in the mornings from about 8:30 through till 9:30 and probably from 2:30 till 3:30, would that be right? The traffic just blocks the road of all the parents going in to pick up their children. When is the school going to be using the correct gate, which was always planned to be Unland Street? If it's going to be a main thoroughfare with more development going on to Hyson Street, we really need to look at access and egress for the school, for safety. Thank you.
I'll take that one, Liz.
And one of the, you're talking about the Islamic school entrance. I've been caught a couple of times now coming up Brewer Street at the stop sign, and the first time there was a car stopped on a single lane coming down westward from Hyson Street at that stop, and when I turned, the car moved. It was waiting to turn into the school, so there's a single lane going westward, and you were sitting duck for a car speeding down the hill.
Yeah, okay. Again, I'll take that on notice. Good information though, and when the school put their plans in, they would have had to provide a traffic plan as part of that, so we can certainly go back as a road operator and have a look to see if they're compliant with that.
Val, did you also have the car end up on its roof on your front yard of Weston Street?
No, that was the speed hump one night, that Christmas time years ago. I think it lost control because the skid marks were straight on the speed hump and it hit the tree next door. It crossed two driveways, so any cars had been in the driveways, they would have been written off. And it's a noisy...
about that, we don't know the detail.
Well, I inherited it as a noisy thing. Every time a truck or a bus or a tradies trailer comes, you hear the crashing all the time. It sounds like a car accident every time, all day.
Any other questions? Okay, I'll repeat my thank you to everybody. You can do it.
Thanks, Bill.
Oh, Bill, just one thing. The correct pronunciation of the street is Hudson Street after the painter. Weston Streets are named after Australian artists, as it's Hans Hudson.
Hudson.
Thank you, Bill.
I get slapped on that at every meeting.
That's been good for a long time now. Yeah.
We have a number of MLAs here. There's a few missing. The photos are all appearing on those slideshow earlier, so you know who's missing. That works then. Who wants to go first from the Murrumbidgee MLAs? You don't fight.
Hello. Yeah, so I think it's been a couple of months since I've been to the last meeting, and just to give everyone a bit of an update of things that have been going on, the census has been released since I last saw you. So the population in the ACT grew quite significantly, more than any other city in Australia, about 14% growth, and Weston Creek did not contribute much to that growth. We only grew by 1,500 people, so we're a pretty stable population here. We're also the oldest cohort, average cohort in Murrumbidgee electorate, so compared to Wodin and Molonglo, we are average age of 41. Molonglo much younger, 31, and Wodin was, I think, about 38 or 9. So yeah, it's fascinating data, and I think more and more things will come out of that over the next few months as they release more and more aspects of that. Coming up next week, we have quite an exciting moment in the Assembly where the Chief Minister will deliver the ACT budget next Tuesday. And I am the Labor representative on the Budget Estimates Committee. So that is myself, James Milligan, and Andrew Braddock, who are both MLAs in the north of Canberra. So we're all on that committee, and we will spend 2 weeks intensively questioning all the ministers for all their different portfolio areas. And yeah, I've reached out to many community organisations and community council to see what they would like to see and what aspects of the budget interest them. I'll also be posting online in the next week after the budget's released and encourage the community to contact me if they have issues that they would like to raise, and I'll see if I can get to them through the questioning, the hearings process. We also have had a lot of inquiries in the committees that I'm on. So we just released the Renewable Energy Innovation Report. So that was actually, we had hearings for that at the beginning of last year, so that report has been quite lengthy. But that was released last week, and just today a report on community corrections in the ACT. So it'll be a few months and the government will respond to those committee inquiries, so it'll be quite interesting to watch to see what they say. In terms of current open inquiries that may be of interest, there's a housing and rental affordability and EV vehicle adoption in the ACT inquiry. There's just been an abortion and reproductive choice in the ACT inquiry that's been launched by the Health Committee, and a future of the working week inquiry. So you can go onto the ACT Legislative Assembly website. They have a committees part of that website. You click on that, go to inquiries, and you can, any citizen or any community group can write a submission, and those submissions will all be taken into consideration by the committee. So I do encourage everyone to have their say on those things. It's another way to input, and I think the committees are an important part of the sort of parliamentary process and feeding into the government's agenda. So yeah, I think that's there's lots of, I think Emma will probably talk about the ACT disability strategies open for comment. There's lots of different things on the Your Say website that you can also have your input on. And I'll be tabling a petition on the Bluett's Block on Bluett's Block next week. So that is a petition that I work with the Conservation Council on, and basically to ensure that there is adequate environmental consideration taken into that block before any development is considered. So again, that petition had quite a high number of signatures or input, so I think about 700 people signed that petition, so that will go to a committee and will receive a government response. So, and again, those sort of questions and lines of questioning will be things that I put to the Minister during the estimates hearings in a couple of weeks' time. So very happy to answer any questions, and yes, Nora.
So with the budget, we'll be stopping all the kangaroo killing and then
I did suspect you were going to go there. So Nora.
That one's out of order. Yes, we told you about that before and went out in the newsletter. We're not having repeat questions anymore. I'll ask you a question. Are you coming to our next meeting, the September meeting, when we're going to talk about Western Edge?
Oh yeah, great.
So we have quite a detailed conversation, I hope. Look forward to seeing you there.
Great.
That's also an ad for a future meeting. Are there any other questions out there? Besides Nora, she's had to go. She's in Sydney. No, give one.
Excellent. Well, don't hesitate to be in touch and raise any issues, and always happy to have a chat. Thank you.
Thanks, Marissa. Now, Emma's turn.
Hello. Now, a few things to share with you that I've been doing this month. Earlier this month, we announced the recipients of some Technology Upgrade Fund grants. We've provided $487,000 to 66 community sector organisations and individuals across the ACT to upgrade technology, to do things like buy new equipment, install software, or get software purpose-built for specific things that organisations need to do, provide training and support for organisations and for individuals. And all of this is to make sure that we're trying to be as inclusive and accessible a community as possible, including online. So community sector organisations often have a lot of people they're trying to provide support to, particularly in very difficult circumstances where they really are reliant on that community organisation for help. But they often don't have the funding to upgrade their technology to be able to provide those services online easily. So this allows them to do things like buy laptops or mobile phones that they can either use in their organisation or loan out to people who can't afford to buy them themselves, to upgrade their systems, their websites and their membership systems and things like that, or to get training and support so that they can make the best use of what they've got. This is a program that will be running again next year and the year after as well. So the grant's normally open for applications around about February. So if you know organisations that could do with that kind of help, do tell them to keep a lookout for it, because it can really make a big difference to an organisation. Something else that I've announced recently, you've probably heard some of the pre-budget announcements coming out. One that I think is really important is funding for the ACT Carer Strategy. We're funding $825,000 over 4 years to support the ACT Carer Strategy. There's around 50,000 people in the ACT who are carers for someone with a disability, someone who is elderly, or for kinship carers for young people and children in foster care situations. Now, those carers have a lot of responsibility and often are people who aren't able to earn a lot of income through employment, and so being able to provide support to them while they're doing this really important work to look after this community that we're all part of, and to care for the people that they love, it takes quite a lot of effort. So making sure that organisations like Carers ACT are able to work with the carers community on what needs to go into our second action plan to support carers with things like access to respite, navigating services and finding the things that can help them will make a big difference to a lot of people's lives. We've also got funding in the budget for a social recovery framework. Now, we've all been through a huge amount over the last few years, and we've really leaned on our community organisations quite a lot over the last few years to help us get through all of that. The social recovery framework will help us to understand what organisations are out in the community, what they're doing, what needs they might have if we were to call on them in an emergency situation like a natural disaster, or like what happened last year when we all had to go into lockdown and there were lots of people who needed some extra help to either put food on the table, reduce social isolation, support young people studying from home and all of those things. So being able to understand what's happening in our community, what our capacity is, if we were needing to deal with a disaster situation, and what kind of support our community sector might need, will really help us to learn a lot of lessons from what we've been through and to be able to apply those in the future. We know that there will be more natural disasters in our future, and so we want to be prepared for that so that we can be more resilient, more able to be accessible and inclusive of everyone in our community. Happy to answer any questions people have.
I've got one because I soak up everybody's social media feed. You were in Queensland yesterday.
Yes.
Tell us about it.
I was. Yes. So one of the things that we're working on at the moment is plans for the first eating disorder residential centre in Canberra. It's going to be built out at Coombs, that's the plan. We're still going through the process to secure the block, but we've been quite open and transparent with the community about where we're thinking about putting this, and we've got a really good concept design that's been done for it. But we're now at the stage where we're starting to think about the detailed design. Exactly what will this building look like? How will the model of care work? How is it all going to fit together? And so yesterday I was up in Queensland with some people from ACT Health, and we were looking at the only other facility that's anything like this in Australia, which is a private facility on the Sunshine Coast. What we're doing in Canberra though is a little bit different. It's going to be a public health facility, so that means that your ability to access the healthcare that you need won't be dependent on whether you've got private health insurance. It will be there for everyone who needs it. It's really important that we have something that's not an inpatient acute service in a hospital, and it's not a day program, it's a step in between. It's part of providing lots of different options so that we can provide people with the right care for the right stage in their journey towards recovery.
Thank you. Is there anybody? Nora, to the microphone. Thank you for your question.
Sorry, I couldn't quite hear the question, Nora.
You asked before, I wasn't there already.
Have you done anything about mental health or the complaints and the list of the victims that they've got there? And the courts involved as well, unfortunately. Have you been able to progress with that at all?
Next week in the Assembly we'll be tabling a report about a review into the Mental Health Secure Facilities Act, and also there is an inquiry open at the moment into the Dolwa facility, which will look at every aspect of how people go in there, what kind of care they receive while they're in there, whether we've got the right governance frameworks in place, the right legislative framework, and how we make sure that people receive the best quality of care while they're in there. So they're open to submissions at the moment if anyone's got any suggestions, and that inquiry is independently chaired as well.
I'll just make one further comment, and I'll then thank you, Emma. We received a digital grant 2 years ago, and it's allowed us to actually transmit to the community. We did that as a result of feedback we were getting, including a letter from Chris Steele, we have now got an audience for last month. We had 251 people, individual views, looked at our broadcast from Evo Energy, so it's literacy speakers, and we had some sea change people here too. So that's also available online. We learned a lot. The people out in the community were watching. And how do I know? I think you've been asking me ridiculous questions when I'm in Woolies. Why did you get that person? So we do appreciate those grants, thank you. And the other toy we're playing with, the community centre, because everybody augments those grants with any funds they've got. The community centre has just rewired the room and allowed us to project continuously, including some key messages. So we are grateful for that program.
Thank you, that's great. Yeah, it's, look, as the program rolls out and more community groups are able to use it, you know, we'll see more and more innovative and helpful things that people are able to do with that. One thing I just wanted to pass on about things I learned while I was in Queensland yesterday at that facility. One of the conversations that you always want to have with people when you're looking at a new facility that you want to have something similar to in your own city is you're looking at what are the lessons learned, you know, what can we learn from how you built yours and, you know, what we could do with ours. They did point out one thing that I would never have thought of, and it's very Queensland, where they were talking about, you know, risks to think about. You know, I was thinking about the usual things about OH&S risks in buildings, that sort of thing. Pythons eating the chickens. They have chickens at their property, and as part of the program, the people who are participating in the program feed the chickens and look after them and that sort of thing. And they came out one morning to find there was quite a large python near the chicken coop with a chicken-sized lump in the middle of it. So, you know, things to look out for that I would never have expected. That was in Queensland. We don't have pythons here. One thing we won't have to worry about, cold weather, that will help us.
Thank you very much, Emma. Who's the other Emma lady? Chris. You want to say anything else? Vera? Okay. All right, well, thank you, everyone. Now, we'll move on to the general meeting. So we've had the minutes of the general meeting at the front. Does somebody want to move them, who was at the meeting and has read the minutes? Rosemary usually reads these right through. Come on, please. Okay, so moved by Rosemary, seconded by... You were there, you're good on the bell. Seconded by... Any business arising from the minutes?
This presentation last week,
you would have received an email, probably today. They had to pull out, the documentation wasn't ready. We've arranged, we've done really well. We're getting 2 sessions in the coming middle of August, one online and one face-to-face, either here or down at the Weston Hub.
So
They're running it. They were using Teams again. I know we have issues with Teams, but it allows them to get the architects to put out the plans that they're working on. Yeah. Okay, so something to look forward to. I tend to lose about 4 or 5 of these in the evening. Find them later on when I clean up. Chair's report. Look, we're just really busy at the moment. The ACT government is hammering us with all these reports. We're trying hard to keep up, and we've learned a few. We've had some great comments, especially on the planning review. I think we had 15 people, individuals besides ourselves, actually contribute to that submission we made. And congratulations to those who put them in. Okay, we've had the budget announcement. We've talked about that this evening, so no one needs to talk anymore. We'll keep on consulting and getting involved in the consultations on the draft planning bill. We understand there's a new version of it going to be taken to Cabinet shortly, and then it will go to the Assembly for a debate. We're hoping it will go to committee. The committee will really get into the detail. We still have a number of concerns. We're not persuaded that it's there yet, but there were a few things we saw last night in the meeting that suggest they listened to a few of the things we said. So we'll see how we go. Okay, we talked about Reilly Street, parking upgrades are coming in September. I'm really looking forward to that. And parking, as you know, with one of these meetings, you're never going to get agreement. So it just requires a call, and we need to point out if there's something really obvious. And we need to be fair and reasonable, because it's about rationing space so everybody gets a fair go. Okay, we're looking at the draft active travel plan, the proposed amendment to the Human Rights Act, the inquiry into EV adoption in the ACT, and we're talking about all sorts of community groups and all sorts of dot points, and I did not think that they would get the interest up that they have. So it makes it sort of difficult when you get contradictory views. Okay, so the government released the Weston Edge investigation. That is up on their website. I encourage everybody to read it and come ridiculously well informed in September when we have our conversation. I think you also need to read it in conjunction with the State of the Environment report to give you an idea of what this country is facing. So read the two, and we'll talk more in September. We've got the garden party event in Featherston Gardens on 30th of October. That is coming together. We've locked the date in. We've got the facility. Chris, we wouldn't mind a little bit of help. Public toilets up there, you know.
Permanent ones.
Yeah, we'll keep on asking. You'll keep on going. Yeah, that's fine, but we'll get there one day. I'm really looking forward to that. And the earlier conversation, we're not having an August meeting. I keep on saying it. People keep on saying it. See you in August. No, you won't. We've simply run out of people. It usually takes 5 people to put on one of these meetings, and I can't. I got 4 today. 1, 2, 3, 4, including me. You've got a lot of stuff to do. You do it quickly, and you've got to do it well, or you look like a fool. So it's not worth attempting it if it's going to fall over. It's unfortunate. It's a fact of life. A number of our committee members have had family and other events rescheduled and rescheduled and rescheduled, and they've all landed at the same date. And then we've, others have got things like grandchildren being born and all that, interstate. So it came down to, I didn't think I could leave to run on his own. He's quite happy. But in the background there will still be stuff going on. And we'll be getting ready for our September meeting, which I'm looking forward to. And are there any questions from anybody? I mean, you've had many.
Just for us, it's about live, you know, first before you do
Yeah, it's not happening online. All right, okay. It's whatever time it is. It's 9:30. And we'll call the meeting closed. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Good to see you.
Yeah.
Thank you.